Greetings everyone. Welcome to video number 4 in the project management series presented by Process-Geekoid. Let's move. So today's agenda, we will be going over the PMBOK process table from last time that has all the 47 processes. And then we will be going over the PMP exam breakdown based on PMBOK 5th edition. And then we'll be going over the first and most important process to start a project, and that is going to be develop Project Charter. And as always, please subscribe, like, and comment. So let's get going. So as you can see, the first and foremost step to start any project is to develop Project Charter, which is your first blue box in this table. And this is really important because this charter is going to be your input to another process in the initiation process group, and that is going to be identify stakeholders, which is right here. So you would need to get approval of this charter for all stakeholders, as we'll see later on in this video, but that's why these two are in this column, for that very reason. So as we can see here, the PMP exam is heavily focused on planning, execution, monitoring, controlling. So this breakdown, the exam has total of 4 hours duration, has 200 multiple choice questions, so that gives you around a minute a question. There is no negative scoring, and the grades given out by PMI is below proficient, moderately proficient, and proficient on the 5 process groups, and PMI does not make the passing score public. So basically you need to aim as high as you can on all of your practice exams, and you need to aim for at least higher than 170 to 180 out of 200. Just try to score as high as you can. So no one knows what the exact passing score is, so just practice. Also, the breakdown of the exam is coincidental and lines up with an actual project life cycle. As you can see here, the exam is heavily focused on planning, executing, and monitoring, controlling. As a result, 80% of the exam is focused on these process groups. However, initiation and closing are also important and account for 20% of the exam. And let's see why this makes sense, right? Well, remember how we talked about last time that initiation and closing happens only once in a project life cycle, and planning, execution, monitoring, controlling happen multiple times in cycles until the customer is happy with the product, service, or result that we as a project team intend to deliver for them. So it stands to reason that planning, executing, and monitoring, controlling is going to keep going on in cycles until the most important process in scope and in the controlling process group is going to be validate scope. That is your make or break point for your project. That is where your customer is going to approve or reject deliverables. That will determine whether or not you will close your project. So that is very important, and that is why planning, executing, and monitoring, controlling happen in cycles. So moving on to develop Project Charter now, we can see that the ITTOs here are unique for this process for develop Project Charter. And they're unique because here you have statement of work, your very first input. You won't see that anywhere else. So project statement of work is nothing but a brief narrative description of the work to be done by the seller or whoever the buyer chooses to do the work with. Now keep in mind, statement of work can be internal, since not all projects are going to be done through a vendor. They could be done in-house, as this ties into the procurement knowledge area where you make or buy decisions are being done in the planning phase of procurement before you actually procure. before performing procurements. That's why statement of work can be internal or external, and it will be dependent on whether or not the project team determines to make in-house or buy something from the outside to get the project done. So the SOW, like I just said, indirectly ties into procurement a little bit, which will be covered in a future video. So the next input here that's unique to Project Charter is the business case. This is very, very important because this is basically saying, why are we doing the project? Typically, this is a very detailed document that has a lot of research tied to it for wooing or convincing a stakeholder and getting their buy-in for the project support. So for example, you'd need to give some sort of numbers, quantitative analysis up front, giving some sort of like research study or some sort of market trend that shows that other companies are doing this and that they are gaining from it. So ROI would be an important factor to put in there. Also other metrics to catch stakeholders' eyes to get buy-in for this project, and that's the ultimate point of it. And agreements in this sense is sort of tying into procurement because we have letter of intent or other preliminary contract to start a project. At this point, it's not as detailed yet because we still have to figure out who we're going to get vendors in procurement if we are going to get a software or a component from the outside or make in-house. So this is still high level. And then we have EEFs and OPAs as inputs. Enterprise and environmental factors are things that a project team cannot control. And these things are like company culture, government regulations, and the other input here are OPAs or organizational process assets. And these are internal policies or procedures that a company has in place to have smooth operations. And the next piece that we're going to be talking about here is the tools and techniques. Now, expert judgment is one of the tools, and this could be either an internal historical record, industry standards, or internal SME resource who finalizes the project charter. So remember, the project manager is participating and initiating the charter, but could require other stakeholders to be involved, and is a collaborative effort. So some questions on the exam might say, the sponsor is creating the project charter. What role does the PM have? Well, the PM is going to be active and participates in creating the charter via the use of facilitation techniques. So that could be a similar question you might see. And some of these techniques are brainstorming. So the first one here is brainstorming, and that is nothing but an unfiltered gathering of ideas. Just getting a group of people into a room and gather all the ideas, and then after we do that, later on in the project, we would use some sort of affinity diagram to group these ideas into logical buckets, and therefore move forward with the project by prioritizing any tickets or issues in the project as time goes on. But as we start the project, we're trying to get some sort of unfiltered ideas from all stakeholders and get input, and then after that we would get a clear idea as to where the project is headed. And also we have conflict resolution as one of the facilitation techniques, and in this we have 4 types of conflict resolution, and these are going to be withdraw, avoid. This is not going to get you very far because conflicts will happen and you won't go anywhere. The other choice we have is to smooth or accommodate an individual or party, and that's not going to be good either because it's really biased. You're letting one party win and it's not going to be fair. And the next piece here is going to be force or direct an outcome, and that's not going to be good either because then it's going to create turmoil between stakeholders, and that is the worst outcome you can get. And compromise reconcile is okay, but it's a 50-50. It's going to be a lose-lose because both parties have to give up something as a mutual compromise to come to a standing agreement. The next piece here, and the most effective conflict resolution technique that PMI recognizes, is problem solving or collaboration. So that is very important. And next we have meeting management, and that's the fourth type of facilitation technique. Of course, PMs spend 90% of their time in meetings and communicate, so this should be no surprise. The project manager will make sure ground rules are followed and sends meeting minutes to all attendees and relevant stakeholders. So the output here, as you can see, is the project charter. And this is going to be provided to all major stakeholders for approval, and this will give the green light. Keep in mind, if the charter is not approved, the project will be doomed to failure and cannot move forward. And a key note to make here is the key benefit of this process is a well-defined project start and project boundaries, start and end date, and it creates a formal record of the project and is a direct way for senior management to formally accept and commit to the project, and this authorizes the project manager to move the project forward and allows the PM to assign resources. So that's really important. And another key note that we'll see later on as we talk further about these processes is that the project charter serves as an input to all of the planning processes in constraint-based knowledge areas. What do I mean by that? Well, this is going to be going into plan scope management. That's one of our constraints. Goes into plan schedule or time management. Goes into plan cost management and plan risk management. So these are the four constraints that the project is going to be playing around with. And resources, now this is logical because the project charter is your green light, and as a PM to assign resources, so it makes sense that these resources are intertwined and govern project success. So the project is successful only if the project charter encompasses a high-level picture that captures, firstly, the high-level scope, what the project's ultimate goal is. Why are we doing it? 2, how long will a project take? Will it take months, years, weeks? Depends. Depends on the scope, of course. 3, we're going to have estimates. Now, at this point in the project, since we haven't planned out anything yet, in most cases we'll be doing a rough order of magnitude estimate, and that's going to be a rough ballpark figure of your estimate for how much the project will cost. And the estimate range is typically from negative 25% to plus 75%, or negative 50% to plus 50% of the project budget, what that would look like. So basically, you know, for example, we could have something like negative, we could have something like 500,000 to $1 million, 500,000. That could be a range, but we don't know yet since we're still haven't planned yet. But we would still need some sort of rough order of magnitude for approval before moving on with the project, because the sponsor is your most important stakeholder and they will determine the budget for you in most cases. If not, you would have to work with the sponsor and other stakeholders to come up with that number before you can move on and assign resources, because the budget is going to determine how much you have available, and that is going to be your driving figure. And then we also look at the negative risks or downside risks or threats, and what the positive risks, upside risk, or opportunities should be taken into consideration by stakeholders. Those are all of the things that would be outlined in a project charter, and that is very important because without this you cannot move forward. Thank you for watching this video, and try to focus on the grid in the beginning of this video as well as the previous videos to understand how to think horizontally and vertically, because everything is connected. And as always, please